Breaking right now on Morning News Now, history in the making. President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin set to meet face to face. It is a high-stakes summit focused on trying to end the war in Ukraine. Any moment now, the president is expected to leave the White House for Joint Base Andrews, where he'll board Air Force One and make his way across the country to Alaska. The meeting is set to take place this afternoon at a U.S. military base in Anchorage, where just yesterday, dozens of protesters gathered in support of Ukraine. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky will not take part in today's talks. He and his European allies are warning, don't make any decisions without the Ukrainian leader. President Trump says he is hopeful today will set the stage for a second meeting with both parties present, putting an end to the three-year war.
We're going to see what happens. And I think President Putin will make peace. I think President Zelensky will make peace. We'll see if they can get along. And if they can, it'll be great.
Good morning. I'm Joe Fryer. Savannah is off on this Friday. We have a lot to get to. Let's get right to it with our team of correspondents and analysts as we monitor all the developments from today's summit. Let's start with NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba. She joins us now from Anchorage with the latest. Monica, good morning. So over the past 24 hours or so, President Trump seemed to be lowering expectations for this summit, even saying there's a 25% chance of it not going well, and that he's setting the table for meetings later that would include Zelensky. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, exactly, Joe. Remember that candidate Donald Trump promised to end this conflict at the very beginning of his administration if he was going to be elected. Certainly now 3.5 years into this conflict and 7 months into his time in office, that has not been an easy feat. That has certainly been incredibly more challenging. And that is something I think the president, the White House are trying to reflect in the way that they are tempering expectations while saying that this will likely be a multi-step process. And we know that when the president comes face to face with Vladimir Putin today, it will be the first time he is coming to the United States in more than a decade. So we are told he is going to receive a red carpet arrival, which of course will be notable optically in what we're going to see, but that then the leaders will have their own meeting before it expands to a larger meeting with the delegations. And then there's the question of a joint press conference, and what comes out of that is dependent on how the talks go. The president saying that if he doesn't like what he hears, Joe, he's prepared to basically turn around, head back to Washington, and basically maybe start over or give up on this. But this has been something the president has been pushing for, saying that he'll know within the first couple of minutes of looking Vladimir Putin in the eye whether this will be a successful day of talks. Joe.
And the sounds of Alaska offering a soundtrack to your report and to the summit later on today. We should note this is not a traditional summit from years past, where diplomats hammer out the agreements in advance, and the meeting is essentially a big photo op. So walk us through what we do plan to see today.
Yeah, even the Kremlin has said certainly that they're not planning to sign any documents, that there isn't any kind of an agreement that they expect the leaders to walk away with. And I think that is what is so critical here, Joe. And we are going to see, again, some of the fanfare that you would expect to see when President Trump meets with a world leader. But it will be notable that it will be on a U.S. military base, and that, of course, this ends President Putin's isolation since Russia invaded Ukraine. There have been very few places that he can travel to, and certainly there have been many world leaders who have not met with him. So the fact that President Trump will be hosting him here is, of course, going to be a big headline from all of this, the fact just that this meeting is taking place. But then they're going to go through those variations of meetings and then that press conference. But what's notable is that the president has even said if he thinks it goes well, he could call Ukrainian President Zelensky. And he even said yesterday twice he would tell him to come to Alaska, that would be much easier, that they could continue talks here, though, again, we're not really sure if that is a realistic possibility. More likely than not, it sounds like that would take place at a later time, again, if things get on the right track to a potential framework for a ceasefire and a peace deal.
And where a second meeting would take place also would be an interesting point that would have to be hammered out. You mentioned a moment ago, President Trump ran on ending the war, saying he would do it in 24 hours. It has now been 7 months. So politically, what is at stake here for the president?
Yeah, this is certainly an incredibly high-stakes moment. In fact, he just wrote that on his social media platform in all capital letters, high stakes. And as you see the plane there, he's going to be heading here in the next couple of minutes. And what's really significant about this political moment, to your question, Joe, is that this has been a relationship between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin that has gone through many different iterations. And remember that at a time, he really praised and felt that he wanted to model himself in the image of Vladimir Putin, in the image of a strong man. And then in the last couple of months, we've really seen a different kind of dynamic where President Trump has said he's been disappointed by him. He's used expletives even to say that they would have a good phone call and then he'd turn around and President Putin would be bombing Ukraine again. So this is a moment where we know, again, politically in the United States, we have seen that shift in the thinking toward Vladimir Putin. But this is also a moment where President Trump has tried to fashion himself as a deal maker. He's pushing for the Nobel Peace Prize. He's talking about that. The White House is bringing that up at sort of every opportunity. So he's the one saying, if I can get a deal, I want to, because I'm somebody who's capable of that. So he's putting a lot on the line here, too, depending on how this all unfolds.
We are keeping an eye on Air Force One sitting there right now at Joint Base Andrews. We expect the president to arrive there within the hour and then take off to Alaska, which is where Monica Alba is reporting for us this morning from Anchorage. Monica, thank you so much. For more on this, let's bring in Kira Rudik. She is a member of parliament in Ukraine. Kira, we appreciate you taking the time to speak with us again, as we've spoken with you so many times over these past 3 years. Just what are your thoughts ahead of this high-stakes summit? Are you hopeful at all?
Hello, John. Thank you so much for having me. I would say here on the ground in Ukraine, we are cautiously optimistic. We hope that definitely this is a high-stakes meeting for President Trump and that he cannot afford to be humiliated once again by Putin. He cannot afford to get nothing of this meeting, and he cannot afford to go ahead looking really bad. So he will have to figure it out. And of course, hopes here are that President Trump will get annoyed at Putin. He will see that Putin didn't have any intention to end the war, which he, again, didn't show any sign or here on the ground that he wants to end the war. And that at some point, President Trump will have to go ahead with the promised peace through strength. He will impose the sanctions. He will confiscate the Russian assets, 300 billion of Russian money, and use them for the sake of Ukraine. And he will go ahead with arming Ukraine to the teeth. This was his promise, and this is, we hope, that will happen. We do not believe that somebody can just look Putin in the eye, shake his hand, and end the war. This did not work before. President Trump is not the first person and was the first world leader to try it. And we just do not believe that it is possible to do it this way. However, it is possible to pressure Russia. It is possible to arm Ukraine. And we see the end game here going exactly this way.
Sources tell NBC News President Trump told European leaders during that call on Wednesday he does not intend to discuss any potential divisions of territory when he meets with Putin today. That's despite earlier comments he would do that. Do you trust President Trump will look out for Ukrainian interests today? Are you worried that at least today Europe and President Zelensky are sidelined here?
Yeah, it's actually very concerning because we used to go with this war when there was agreement between the United States, European leaders and Ukraine that nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. And this is how it was with the previous administration. Right now, this is the first sign that something about Ukraine can be discussed without Ukraine and without Europe. However, Joe, you know, I'm here not so worried about it because I know that in Ukraine, we just will simply not accept something that will not be in Ukraine's interest. And here we are the same people who declined to capitulate in 2022. So we will just not accept something that American president and Russian dictator will figure out between themselves if it not have the end of the war or Ukraine's best interest in mind.
In your mind today for Ukraine, what is the best possible outcome?
That President Trump will go ahead and say, I tried to talk Putin in. He refused. He was going with all those USSR ideas and restoring Russian empire. I see that there is no deal can be made with him. So we go ahead with the peace through strength. This is what I think the best outcome is. However, we don't know, and we just want to wish President Trump wisdom and lots of strength here at this meeting. We understand that he is trying to give this diplomatic opportunity a chance. However, again, by the fact that we have seen here on the ground, there is no possibility of the diplomatic solution.
All right. Kira Rudik, we appreciate your time this morning, as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and glory to Ukraine.
For more on the international reaction, let's bring in NBC News Chief International Correspondent Keir Simmons. Keir, good morning. We just heard from Keir there about Europeans and Ukrainians being sidelined from today's summit. That has created a lot of nerves among some leaders. International analysts already calling this session a win for Putin, just because it's happening, and it's happening on U.S. soil. What more can you tell us about the global optics of this meeting?
Well, Joe, let's just say first that what we heard there from Kira Rudik is how sophisticated, really, the Ukrainian message has become since, for example, that famous Oval Office blow-up with President Zelensky and President Trump and Vice President Vance. What you heard her say there, you know, is we're optimistic. We wish President Trump wisdom. So being supportive of President Trump and then segueing on to make the key points that Ukraine has been making all week about the ways in which Ukraine would not be prepared to compromise. As an example, saying, well, you can't swap territory when the territory is all part of Ukraine. That doesn't make sense. Now, in terms of the question with the Russians, the Russians are arriving with messaging that is, frankly, as maximalist as ever. The message that they are sending is that President Putin is arriving there to explain to President Trump his position. I mean, extraordinarily, you have the foreign minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, wearing a USSR shirt as he arrives there. You can't mistake that kind of messaging from the Russians. Ultimately, the two sides, Ukraine and Russia, are still a very, very long way apart. And it's hard to see, as the member of parliament there just suggested, really honestly, it's hard to see how President Trump and President Putin are going to sit down together and kind of resolve that in a way that meetings between President Putin and Steve Witkoff, President Trump's envoy, hours and hours and hours of meetings, haven't achieved. And then just more broadly speaking, the Europeans on the outside watching are going to be, I suspect, ready with their messaging as soon as they understand what's happened in that meeting. And it's really unpredictable. It's very difficult to know. I will say this, to your point about President Putin having kind of achieved a win simply by having this meeting, I think that's certainly true. And if you look back, if anyone has the time, you need to go back and watch the news conference between President Putin and President Trump. The last time they held a news conference in Helsinki, I mean, President Trump was, in his first term, was hugely criticized for that, for being too understanding of President Putin in that news conference. So, I mean, that's going to be kind of policy making once again in front of the cameras in real time, and there will be people really biting their fingernails in the Trump administration, in Europe, in Ukraine, about how that's going to go.
Yeah, Kira, I want to ask you more about that. I mean, do you get a sense how much is Helsinki on the mind of European leaders as they sit on the sidelines waiting to see how this unfolds? I mean, do they seem confident President Trump is going to stick to the plan?
Well, you know, rhetorically speaking, does President Trump ever stick to a plan? I mean, that's part of his politics, isn't it? That's part of the way he operates. So, I mean, of course, inevitably, in capitals like here in London, where I am, and other European capitals, there will be very, very worried about whether or not he will stick to the plan. But I will say this, and I think it's important, when we come to the end of all of this tonight, and we get the kind of fireworks, something to keep in mind, that's not the end of the story. We've seen that just in the past week where Steve Witkoff met with President Putin. There was an agreement that there should be a meeting. And then you watch the Europeans and the Ukrainians work incredibly hard diplomatically to shift the position and almost to negotiate all the way through this past week, ready for this meeting today. And I think you'll see that again. So what you hear later tonight, it will not be the end of the messaging, because immediately the Ukrainians and Europeans will weigh in.
All right. right. Keir Simmons, as always, we appreciate your time and your reporting. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. Now, the true weight of this meeting will be felt in Ukraine, of course, which has endured more than 3 years of war. Russian forces still continue to attack Ukraine using drones and missiles, hoping to seize control of the entire nation. Our NBC News chief international correspondent Richard Engel spoke with Ukrainians about their expectations ahead of today's summit.
Sometimes what you find accidentally is the most revealing. On the outskirts of Kharkiv, we came across a funeral for a Ukrainian soldier killed in a recent Russian attack. They allowed us to film this painful, intimate moment, usually out of sight. Ukraine doesn't like to show its military losses. The soldier's mother grieved, barely able to stand. Her son, Andriy Reshetilov, only recently drafted and sent to the front lines, leaves behind 2 children. I wondered what these people think about a potential ceasefire. The soldier's older brother, Artem, also serving, agreed to speak for everyone.
How are you feeling about the war and peace talks and where all of this is going?
We don't have to compromise with the enemy and give up our beloved land because this enemy won't stop and will return even stronger, he said.
So even now, as your family is making the ultimate sacrifice, you think there should be no compromise, shouldn't give up any land in exchange for a ceasefire or some sort of peace deal?
Yes, he said, because we know Russia and they never keep agreements. The ceremony was over quickly, perhaps because there was a line.
And even as one funeral is wrapping up, another one is about to begin right next to where the last soldier was buried. Another body is going in.
All the graves marked with flags are for soldiers. We visited a Ukrainian drone base hidden in a garage. The unit's commander, Leonid Maslov, also has little confidence in President Trump's meeting with Putin.
I'm not optimistic. Putin is playing a very bad game. He will deceive Trump for sure. 100%. Trump will be deceived.
Richard Engel, NBC News Now.
And with the world now focused on Alaska, those who live in Anchorage are getting ready to host this high-stakes summit. It's a state with deep ties to Russia. As NBC News Now anchor Gadi Schwartz shows us, those connections go back centuries.
In the far north, America's last frontier might bring natural beauty, midnight sunsets, and frozen wilderness to mind. But so often overlooked is Alaska's long history with Russia and its people now hosting a pivotal moment in geopolitical history.
It's really a fascinating opportunity for Alaska to shine. I think it'd also be very exciting for Alaska and for the city of Anchorage to be a part of something like that. I think it's fairly historic.
As Trump and Putin meet in Anchorage, they will be more than 15 times closer to Russia than Washington, D.C. At the closest point on Alaska's coast, Russia and the U.S. are just miles apart. That geography lesson so famously summed up by former Governor Sarah Palin when she ran for the White House in 2008.
They're our next door neighbors, and you can actually see Russia from land here in Alaska.
The island on the left is Russia. The one on the right is the United States. They're just 2.5 miles apart. But even closer is the historical bond between Alaska and Russia. It was Russians who first settled in Alaska in 1784. And just like the rest of the Americas, their conquest brought massacres and disease to the natives. As a colony of Russia, it was known as Russian America from 1799 to 1867 until, ironically, the Crimean War in Ukraine forced Russia to sell Alaska to the United States for a little more than $7 million to help offset Russians' growing debt. Alaska became a U.S. territory in 1867. But there are still signs of Alaska's Russian past, like these Orthodox churches, with some hoping their historical tie may lead to a future Russian-Ukrainian peace.
Our hope is that God will somehow touch the hearts of those involved, that there will be a valuing of life, a valuing of peace, a valuing of human life in general, and that will lead to a ceasefire and hopefully peace eventually.
Our thanks to Gadi Schwartz for taking us through Alaska's history with Russia. In Washington, D.C., the Trump administration is expanding its authority over D.C. law enforcement. Now the White House is shifting decision-making authority from its police chief to the head of the Drug Enforcement Administration. Attorney General Pam Bondi announced Thursday the Justice Department will name DEA head Terry Cole as Emergency Police Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police Department. It's a controversial move facing pushback from district leaders. National Guard troops and federal agents are ramping up their presence, starting 24-hour patrols now around the Capitol. NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez joins us with the latest. Gabe, good morning. So what power does this order give to Terry Cole, and what are we hearing in response from D.C.'s mayor and its AG?
Well, hi there, Joe. Well, it's a remarkable power struggle here in the nation's capital. Up until now, you had heard mostly a cooperative tone from district officials with regards to the federal takeover of the police department. But as you mentioned, now Attorney General Pam Bondi has appointed the DEA Administrator Terry Cole as the, quote, Emergency Police Commissioner. Essentially, he is leading the police department. However, D.C. officials say not so fast. The D.C. Attorney General basically is saying that the order is unlawful and that city leaders are not, they don't have to follow it. The mayor as well is also pushing back on this. This will likely end up in the courts. But again, a remarkable power struggle. And right now it is sort of unclear who is actually leading the D.C. Police Department, Joe. And this announcement comes as the president claims the military presence is already working. What is he saying and what is actually happening on the ground? Well, listen, it's very interesting. You speak with residents here in D.C., the reaction is mixed. We spoke with one community activist who has been here for decades and is part of a neighborhood watch program, has led it. He was very supportive of the federal takeover of the police department and says the increased presence by federal resources that you see right there on the screen is very welcome, that crime, in his view, has dropped over the last several days. However, there are others who say that this essentially amounts to authoritarianism, that the feds are coming in and taking over the police department when they shouldn't. Now, yesterday I was in the Oval Office when President Trump spoke about this. Listen to what he had to say.
People are so happy to see our military going into D.C. and getting these thugs out. As you know, we arrested a lot of people yesterday. We arrested a lot of people today. Washington, D.C. is at its worst point, and it will soon be at its best point. You're going to have a very safe, you're going to have a crime-free city.
Now, look, the White House saying that overnight, the night before, there were a total of about 45 arrests by federal agents. That, when you compare it to the average that the D.C. Metro Police does on any given night, they average around 67 or so each night. So it's questionable whether the federal resources have made a huge difference in terms of arrest. However, the White House and the president also mentioning that this has been a huge deterrent effect. So, again, the Trump administration arguing that this is already working, Joe. Yeah, and to be fair, it's probably going to take some time to actually see what the numbers say before we can make any assessments, because any number can go one way or the other. You mentioned there are some people in the city who do actually welcome this, but we also know there are some who don't. There's been some pushback. What are you hearing there? Well, yes, and as I mentioned earlier, the D.C. city officials, up until now, had struck this cooperative turn. Mayor Bowser had been arguing that she was powerless to turn down this federal help and in some ways wanted to work with the federal government to address the issue of crime in D.C., which, like many major cities, has had to deal with it over the last few years. Although crime statistics do show that crime had been on the way down. The Trump administration argues that those numbers had been manipulated, so even that is a huge debate at this point. But yesterday, Joe, there was that protest, more than 100 protesters that had gathered at a commercial residential area here in D.C. When local police, along with federal agents, had set up a checkpoint that you saw right there. Those protesters heckled the law enforcement officers. There was at least one arrest. And then also there was another incident earlier in the week where a man threw a Subway sandwich at a federal officer. You see the aftermath right there. He then ran away. Police arrested him. There you see the video that essentially went viral You see him throwing that sandwich at that federal officer. Well, yesterday we learned, according to the Attorney General, that that man actually worked at the Department of Justice. And the Attorney General says that he's since been fired.
All right. Gabe Gutierrez reporting from the White House. Gabe, thank you so much. Florida is set to open its second immigration detention center. At a news conference Thursday, Governor Ron DeSantis said the new facility will open in the Baker Correctional Institution, which is about 45 miles west of Jacksonville. It'll hold about 1,300 detainees. The facility, which he nicknamed the Deportation Depot, follows the opening of the so-called Alligator Alcatraz in the Everglades last month. DeSantis says the new facility will open soon, but he did not give an exact timeline. More scorching temperatures are in the forecast for this weekend, prompting heat alerts throughout the Midwest and southeastern parts of the country. Meteorologists are also keeping an eye on Tropical Storm Erin, which is still pretty far out to sea, though it's picking up steam. Forecasters say it's expected to become a major hurricane over the weekend. And out west, more evacuation orders are in place with wildfires breaking out across a number of states. This fire in northern Utah has forced hundreds of people to evacuate their homes. In California, evacuation orders are in place in northern Los Angeles County after this brush fire consumed some 500 acres in a matter of hours. Let's get more on the severe conditions with your Morning News Now weather. Meteorologist Michelle Grossman joins us now. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. And yeah, the heat does continue. So does the storm chances, not only today, but tomorrow and also Sunday. Starting with the heat, because we do have extreme heat in some spots. 50 million people impacted today from Omaha to Oklahoma City, Jackson, New Orleans, Tallahassee, down to Tampa. And we're going to see those temperatures soaring once again into the 90s. And then humidity plays a big role today because we're going to see heat indices 105 to 110 in some spots. So taking a look at some of these numbers into the 90s in Kansas City, factoring that humidity, feeling like 104. It's going to feel like 106 in Memphis, feeling like 108 in Savannah. That will be the same story as we go throughout tomorrow as well. Weekend storms, not only today, we're looking at showers and storms in the southeast because of that heat and humidity and because of this triggering stationary front. Good news, though, to the northeast, New England, parts of the northeast, less humid. You're going to feel that. You felt that yesterday later on in the day. You're going to feel that once again today. So that's a good part of today. And then tomorrow, we're looking at a few storms rumbling into the Midwest. There's that front right there stretched across portions of the Midwest and Great Lakes. So we'll see a flood risk once again from Minnesota east to Michigan. Sunday, another storm chance in the northeast. We're going to see that front sink a little bit further to the south, a little bit further to the east, and that's going to bring those storm chances. Where you see these dots here, that's the futurecast showing us where we think any of these storms will show up. But you want to bring the umbrella because they can pop up anywhere, really. Storms likely from Maine to Minnesota. Storm threat today, that would mainly be confined to portions of the upper Midwest. That includes Minneapolis, Eau Claire, down to La Crosse. Winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour, damaging hail. A tornado or two is possible. They should be on the brief side, but could see some heavy downpours also. Tracking Erin, it is a very strong storm at this point. 70 miles per hour, a strong tropical storm, I should say. Moving northwest at 17 miles per hour. It's moving into favorable conditions. So we do expect it to strengthen to a Category 1 storm today. And then look how it blossoms. It's kind of getting into that really warm air. It doesn't have wind shear, dry air to tear it apart. So by Sunday, we're looking at even late Saturday, we could see a major storm at a Category 3 storm with winds at 115 miles per hour. Monday, Category 4 storms with winds at 130 miles per hour. Joe, the good news right now is all the models are showing that it's going to curve off to the north and east. Could affect Bermuda. That's still in the question, but the East Coast looks good right now, with the exception of some life-threatening surf and also rip tides. But we're going to watch it, of course.
Of course, and that's the last thing we need right now is a hurricane on the East Coast. So that's a bit of a relief. Thanks, Michelle. Appreciate it. Much more to come here on Morning News Now, including continuing coverage of today's historic summit in Alaska. We will bring you the latest as President Trump prepares to meet face-to-face with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Up first after the break, in-flight chaos. A confrontation forces a cross-country flight to make an emergency landing. Now, one passenger faces federal charges. What we're learning from people on board next. Stay with us. We're back with new details about that Breeze Airways flight that had to make an emergency landing earlier this week after an unruly passenger turned violent. The plane was flying from Virginia to California, but ended up landing in the middle of the country. This morning, we're hearing from people who were on board as the chaos unfolded. Here's NBC News correspondent Liz Kreutz.
The man seen in this video on board a Breeze Airways flight appearing in court and facing federal charges.
They said they had him restrained, he broke out, and there's passengers holding him down now.
Authorities arresting 46-year-old David Carter after the airline says he started a physical altercation with flight attendants and other passengers on board.
The men behind me are like, yo, he's drunk. And then the next thing you know, he's belligerent, he's doing too much. He's using racial slurs, he's in people's faces.
Passenger PK Mackey says a football player on the flight jumped in to help after Carter broke free twice from his restraints.
Thank God for linebacker 17C, because he really saved the day. I've been flying for over 10 years, and I ain't never witnessed no mess like this.
The flight was heading from Norfolk, Virginia to Los Angeles Wednesday when the pilot made the decision to divert to Grand Junction, Colorado.
There's information that he struck a flight attendant.
The airline saying one flight attendant and one passenger were evaluated for minor injuries.
It was really surreal to see the plane pulling in and seeing all the cop vehicles and I guess the feds right outside. It was really insane.
The FAA says this is among more than 1,000 reports of unruly passengers already this year.
Our thanks to Liz Kreutz for that report. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy posted a warning to unruly passengers yesterday. He wrote on X, "It is a felony to assault flight attendants, and assailants will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law." On the health front, scientists are warning the public about an invasive tick species. It has a dangerous and potentially deadly strain of bacteria. NBC News medical contributor Dr. John Torres explains why we're seeing more of them and what could happen if one of these ticks bites you.
I open one of them.
Every morning, Godar's Malai opens dozens of envelopes containing ticks mailed by bite victims. Malai is an entomologist on the lookout for longhorn ticks, an invasive species that, unlike other ticks, can reproduce itself through cloning. The tick is present in at least 21 states and is rapidly spreading across the eastern U.S.
Here is a female longhorn tick. As you can see, the body is reddish brown.
Scientists in Malai's lab at the Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Station have identified an emerging bacteria in the longhorn tick for the first time. The pathogen can lead to ehrlichiosis, a tick-borne disease that causes symptoms such as fever, severe headaches, rash, and potentially death. Climate change, which is creating warmer and wetter conditions around the globe, is influencing how longhorn ticks transmit ehrlichiosis in places like Connecticut.
Because of climate change, we are having shorter winter months, and as a result, this tick doesn't need to do that much dormancy. It is active almost all year round, except for a few months.
So that means you're more likely to get bit. If you're bit, it's more likely to feed, and if it feeds, it's more likely to reproduce.
Correct.
From 2008 to 2018, Connecticut saw just 2 cases of ehrlichiosis. Now that number has jumped to almost 30. Nationwide, ehrlichiosis cases have increased 15-fold since 2001. Malai tested ticks for ehrlichiosis by grinding them down and then extracting their DNA. That DNA sample is amplified and sequenced to find genetic material from Ehrlichia chafiensis, one of the bacteria that causes the disease.
So you see the first hit is Ehrlichia chafiensis.
Jennifer Platt, a public health expert studying tick-borne diseases, contracted ehrlichiosis in 2011.
I felt like death. I felt horrible, like severe weakness, malaise, no energy.
As cases rise in Connecticut, health officials last month shut down a Bridgeport beach for the rest of the season due to an influx of longhorn ticks and other tick species. How big is the risk for Connecticut residents and even beyond Connecticut borders?
The reality is right now we don't really know because this is a new tick that has come into our community. But we do know that risk from tick-borne diseases in general is something that we have to be aware of in Connecticut at all times.
Dr. John Torres, NBC News.
Coming up, our breaking news coverage continues. Moments ago, President Trump leaving the White House. He'll be heading to Joint Base Andrews, set to head to Alaska for a historic summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin. We're going to bring you a live update after the break. You are watching Morning News Now. back with the latest on our top story, the high-stakes meeting between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. It is now just hours away. Moments ago, President Trump departed the White House and will soon arrive at Joint Base Andrews, where he'll board Air Force One, then fly to Anchorage, Alaska. That's where the two leaders will convene for a summit, which the White House says is aimed at bringing about an end to the war with Ukraine. It's going to be the first time these two leaders are face-to-face in 6 years. President Trump has warned of, quote, severe consequences for Russia if it does not agree to a ceasefire. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and European leaders have been sidelined from this highly anticipated meeting. NBC News reporter Matt Bodner joins us now with the latest. Matt, good morning. So start by walking us through what today's summit is expected to look like.
Joe, good morning. Well, both presidents are making their way to Alaska now. Trump, as you mentioned, on his way to Air Force One. That will be about a 7-hour flight. Putin actually left Moscow yesterday, but he stopped off for basically a pit stop in the far eastern city of Magadan. That is a 4-hour flight from Anchorage. Now, we do expect Trump to arrive first. Two administration officials tell NBC News that the plan is essentially for Putin to receive a red carpet welcome when he touches down, with Trump greeting him there. A firm schedule for the day has not actually been published yet. You know, things will probably remain fluid to an extent, but we do expect events to start happening around 3 p.m. Eastern, give or take, depending on when these planes actually land. And the Kremlin has indicated that the two presidents will actually sit down for several hours. You know, knowing Putin, that could actually run for quite a long time. At some point later in the evening, Putin and Trump will emerge from their meeting for a joint press conference. And then, as far as we understand, everyone will go home. And as I mentioned, Putin can talk for a while, so we might be waiting for some time for news out of this summit. But I think the main thing to expect from today is anything.
And Putin said President Trump is making, quote, sincere efforts to try and end the war in Ukraine ahead of today's summit. We spoke with Keir Simmons a bit earlier this hour about how international analysts already see this meeting as a win for Putin. I mean, how does the U.S. look on the world stage right now?
Well, there's obviously a lot of concern about what Trump will end up doing today. To put it bluntly, the U.S. under Trump has been something of an unreliable partner. In the case of the Europeans, and especially the Ukrainians, they don't really have much of a choice at the moment other than to hope for the best and do what they can to prepare for the worst. They've put a lot of time into talking with Trump before this meeting to try to ensure that he stays on side. And you know, so we've seen a lot of careful statements and careful diplomacy the past few days, the past few months. There have been moments where Trump has been rather pro-Russian, for lack of a better word. He's halted military assistance to Ukraine in the past. And that did result in real damage to their war efforts. Trump has been much harsher on Russia recently than he's ever been. But it is clear that Trump can change his tune on a dime. So I think there's a lot of, you know, people holding their breath today. If the Ukrainians and the Europeans had their way, today's meeting likely wouldn't be happening. As I mentioned, there's been a lot of effort to keep him on side the past week. And going into this meeting, it does look like it's paid off. But I think everyone understands at this point, again, that anything can happen today. But to answer your initial question directly, the U.S. looks a bit erratic and unreliable at the moment.
So obviously the goal is to bring an end to the war in Ukraine, but we should note that war continues. Russia still attacking the country in recent days, including a breakthrough in Ukraine's front lines. What is the latest on the ground there?
So we know that Russia is pushing very hard in the frontline sectors near Pokrovsk right now. That's a major strategic location in Donetsk. It's one of the areas that Putin really wants to be given in these negotiations wholesale. He doesn't currently control the whole area. Earlier this week, we saw some Russian breakthroughs in the Ukrainian lines there. Ukraine has claimed to have largely contained them. But as ever with this war, it is difficult to ascertain just what exactly is happening sometimes on the ground. And we really are at the mercy of statements by both militaries. What is clear, what's important for today, is that Russia is really committing hard in this sector. And Putin is likely hoping to argue to Trump that his battlefield momentum is growing and that Zelensky is losing. Zelensky, meanwhile, has been arguing this week that this is all a bluff and that Russia really can't sustain the losses that it's putting in right now to achieve the breakthroughs. And the fact of the matter is that we've actually seen Russia do this kind of thing before other negotiations in the past.
We are keeping an eye on Air Force One there at Joint Base Andrews in Maryland. The president expected to arrive there momentarily, where he'll depart for Anchorage, Alaska for today's high-stakes summit. Matt Bodner, thank you so much, as always, for your reporting. Coming up, a potential shakeup in the tech world. The Trump administration reportedly considering taking a stake in Intel just days after the president called for the CEO to resign. But we know next. This is Morning News Now. We are back with the growing concern over the impact of tariffs on U.S. businesses, especially those that sell food products. Nearly 75% of U.S. food imports already face or could be facing tariffs. That's equal to $163 billion worth of product. Many small business owners say they've already passed on as much expense to their customers as they can. And if tariffs drive import prices even higher, they could be forced out of business. CNBC Global Supply Chain reporter Lorianne LaRocco joins us now with more on this. Good to have you with us. So we're seeing some of the biggest tariff impacts on coffee and tea prices right now. Talk about why those imports are affected perhaps more than most.
Good morning, Joe. So your cup of Joe is going to be a lot more expensive in the coming months. And the reason why is because both Brazil and India, the two countries where we source our teas and some of our coffee, we're looking at 50% tariffs. And you mentioned the small businesses. The price is increasing so much, Joe, that I spoke with one coffee company in Lincoln, Nebraska. That coffee shop, they can't make their menus fast enough to reflect the new prices. And so you're looking at a 15% year-over-year increase in that price of coffee.
What other food imports have been seeing higher price tags lately?
We're seeing items that we cannot grow here in America, like avocados, bananas, tomatoes, which are made here, but they're year-round. What we're going to see here is the fact that we have a seasonality where we're used to having our blueberries year-round or tomatoes year-round. Because of the tariffs and the price, you might see that pullback, and we might go back to the seasonality back in the 70s when the supply chain was less universal.
And avocado prices have already been expensive enough, as anyone who loves guacamole will tell you. So let's talk beyond higher grocery bills here. How else will everyday Americans feel the impact of all this?
The wallop to the wallet is going to hit us in the fall. And the reason why is a lot of these items that were tariffed are coming in now, or they are in the warehouse. So we're going to be looking at more expensive sweaters. We're going to be looking at more expensive holiday items and decor. So it's in the beginning stages, and that's the reason why we haven't seen prices across the board with these elevated prices.
You know, a recent report revealed nearly half of all U.S. small business owners have seen their revenues drop since the beginning of the year. That's before the Trump administration even began imposing these tariffs. So what is the long-term reality for small businesses in the U.S., especially if these tariff rates do stick around?
They don't have the bandwidth that a large company has. So they don't have the capital. They don't have the access to capital. And so what they're doing is that they're pulling back on items. We've actually had layoffs. And so the trickle-down effect is going to be exponential because of that and so on effect. So if you're looking to go to your local coffee shop and they have to lay people off, you're going to see that. You're going to feel that. But then also it's that extra community around it, the truck drivers that bring the coffee beans or the product in. So those are exponential impacts, if you will, in terms of how one microcosm could actually impact the greater organization.
A reminder, there is always a domino effect to these things. Lorianne LaRocco, good to have you with us. Appreciate your time this morning. We've got even more money news for you. Shares of chip giant Intel are back up to speed this morning. CNBC's Silvana Henao has more on what's prompting the pop, plus some other dollar sign headlines. Silvana, good morning.
Hey, Joe. Good morning. Happy Friday to you. Shares of Intel rallying on a Bloomberg report. The Trump administration is considering taking a stake in the struggling chip maker. Now, the plan emerging from a meeting between President Trump and Intel CEO at the White House on Monday. Intel stock fell sharply last Friday after the president called for the CEO to resign over alleged business ties with China. Now, it's unclear how an arrangement with the government would be worked out. Intel has struggled to keep up with rivals like AMD and NVIDIA, especially in artificial intelligence. Airbnb has launched a new Reserve Now, Pay Later option. So users can book a reservation without paying right away, putting it off under a later date before check-in. Now, Airbnb will require payment before the end of a stay's free cancellation period, ensuring, that the hosts have time to secure another booking, even if a guest cancels. Now, Airbnb will still charge upfront for travel insurance and other optional add-ons. And oh man, times are tough even for the tooth fairy. Delta Dental says kids are getting an average of just over $5 left under their pillow for each tooth. That's down 14% from last year. And the tooth fairy is also scaling back on extra gifts. Only 1 in 6 kids are getting money and something else. That's down about 20% from last year. The average cash gift has increased 285% since Delta Dental started tracking this in 1998, Joe.
Wow. I got a quarter. Yeah. What did you get?
I got a quarter. That's what I got, if I even got that.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's what fit in the little pillow that had the little pocket that went underneath, right? Okay.
Well,
Savannah, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Coming up, our breaking news coverage does continue as President Trump prepares to head to Alaska for a historic summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin. We'll bring you another live update after the break. You're watching Morning News Now. To return to our top story today, President Trump setting off for his highly anticipated meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Anchorage, Alaska, aimed at trying to end the war in Ukraine. You are looking at a live picture right now at Joint Base Andrews. The president left the White House a few moments ago. He's motorcade just now arriving at the base, where he will, we expect him to board Air Force One and then make his way a several-hour flight to Anchorage, Alaska. Cameras are in place here. We're waiting to see if the president speaks with the media, answers any questions before getting on that plane and heading west. We want to bring in NBC News reporter Matt Bodner. Matt, set the scene for us. Once the president arrives in Anchorage later today, what do we expect?
Thanks, Joe. Well, basically, we expect him to essentially roll out the red carpet for Russian President Vladimir Putin. Putin is waiting right now himself in Magadan. That's a city in the far east of Russia. It's about a 4-hour flight from Anchorage. So Putin actually left yesterday. Presumably, they're trying to ensure that he does arrive second. It would be harder to time this if he flew direct from Moscow. But basically, we don't know too much about the specific agenda for the day. Neither side has given us too much information on that. We know this is all set to start not long after both of them arrive, 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. That could slide depending on when Air Force One takes off. From there, the two of them will go into a one-on-one meeting with translators. That can go on for quite a long time, Joe. President Putin loves to talk. He's known to really get into it with the people he's speaking with. So we could end up waiting quite a long time tonight to hear any news out of this summit at all. We do understand that there will potentially be other meetings taking place with the Russian and American delegation. The Russian delegation led by Putin's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, actually arrived in Anchorage yesterday wearing a USSR T-shirt, just to give you a taste of what Marco Rubio might contend with today.
Yeah.
At some point, we will see a joint press conference from Putin and Trump this evening, though.
Yeah, and Maddie, we're watching right now is President Trump not stopping to take any questions from the media. He's boarding Air Force One right now and will be heading right to Anchorage, Alaska, waving to folks right now as he prepares to take off on this historic journey and this historic summit. Matt, you mentioned the plan is to have a joint news conference after they meet face-to-face. Whether that happens, though, could depend on what happens behind closed doors, right?
Absolutely. I mean, so we know that the Russians are going to show up to this meeting with very maximalist demands. The Kremlin has been signaling for the past few days, weeks, months, years, really, that what their positions are. You know, they want a lot from Ukraine. They have some very high-level demands of NATO, of the United States, and its presence in Europe. And there's no indication at all that President Putin is willing to walk any of that back. That's, of course, a very difficult position to negotiate with. So the big question is, what kind of patience President Trump will have with that, what his actual concrete goals are. We know from statements in recent days that, you know, when they first announced this summit last week, President Trump himself did describe it as a potential breakthrough. They've really leaned into tempering expectations in recent days, now casting this more as like an exploratory meeting to see what's possible. Ceasefire is high on the agenda, so the Europeans were pushing very hard in their virtual summit with President Trump and J.D. Vance earlier this week that no deals can actually be made with President Putin without an immediate unconditional ceasefire so that they can really talk about the situation. So the major question is will Trump hold that line? What does that look like? So there is a scenario in which this is all over rather quickly.
And as we watch right now, Joint Base Andrews, President Trump has boarded Air Force One. Plane will soon take off, making its way to Anchorage. Matt, we have like 30 seconds left here, but you talk about Ukraine, you talk about Ukraine's European allies. They're watching pretty nervously right now because Ukraine is not part of these talks today, right?
Absolutely. The White House did try to make that happen, or at least they said they did. One of the initial things Trump wanted to do was set up a trilateral meeting with him, President Putin, and Zelensky, potentially even in this venue when it first came to mind. But the idea of Trump negotiating potentially on Ukraine's behalf without Ukraine in the room makes everyone very uncomfortable.
All right, Matt Bodner helping us cover this huge story this morning. President Trump about to depart from Joint Base Andrews in Maryland, make his way to Anchorage, Alaska for a huge face-to-face summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin. That does it for this hour of Morning News Now. Stay with us. The news continues right now. Good Friday morning. I'm Joe Fryer. Savannah is off today. Developing this morning, Alaska calling. Moments ago, President Trump arriving at Joint Base Andrews, his destination, America's last frontier, for a historic one-on-one summit with Vladimir Putin. The meeting marking the first time the Russian leader will step foot on American soil in nearly a decade. Mr. Trump's mission is simple: bring a peaceful end to the years of violence in Ukraine, a devastating war that saw a deadly flare-up of fighting overnight. Notably absent from the conversation, though, Ukraine's own President Zelensky, who has been sidelined from it all. Also in the news, fighting fire with fire. California Governor Gavin Newsom now pushing his own plan to redraw that state's congressional map come November. It's a searing call to action coming as some top lawmakers in Texas brawl over controversial redistricting efforts there. But is it all easier said than done? And could it actually help move the needle for Democrats in Washington in the coming years? Plus, more trouble at the grocery store this morning. Fresh inflation data revealing the price of veggies spiked by nearly 40% last month. So what might this summer of vegflation mean for your next trip to the checkout counter? We are watching your wallet. And Stock Up Showdown. We're going to take you inside the nationwide race to get hungry consumers their grocery essentials just hours after ordering online. Why Amazon is now betting big on its latest same-day delivery push. We're going to begin this morning with that high-stakes meeting between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. It is now just hours away. Moments ago, President Trump boarded Air Force One to head to Anchorage, Alaska, where the two leaders will meet face-to-face in a summit later today. Their goal, trying to end the war in Ukraine. Now, Ukrainian President Zelensky will not be part of today's meeting, as European allies say decisions should not be made without him. President Trump warned that Russia will face, quote, severe consequences if it does not agree to a ceasefire, but has lowered expectations for the summit in the last 24 hours. Let's start with NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba. She is in Anchorage awaiting the president's arrival. Monica, good morning. We just saw the president get on Air Force One. Which members of his administration are joining him for this important trip?
It's a lengthy list, Joe. We know that there are some really key cabinet members who are going to be accompanying the president, Secretary of State Rubio, who we know will play a key role today during these talks, the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. We know also the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, and the CIA Director, John Ratcliffe, will be joining him, in addition to Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and, of course, his Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles. Now, that list is notable because we know that when you have these kinds of meetings, of course, there's a moment where Presidents Trump and Putin will be in a smaller setting and able to have a conversation with interpreters. But then that broadens out, and these larger delegations may also discuss issues outside of the war in Ukraine, or issues, economic ones, perhaps, that are tied to that. And so it's an opportunity to have a conversation about some of these other issues. And likely Russia wants to have that because they want to open this agenda up, because this meeting, of course, Joe, significantly is ending Putin's isolation in the Western world, allowing him to come to the United States for these consequential talks after Russia invaded Ukraine 3.5 years ago is the backdrop to all of this. So the president now has about a 7-hour journey here where he will be working with his top aides and, of course, finalizing that strategy heading into the meeting.
And there we see just about 5-6 minutes after President Trump boarded Air Force One, it is starting to taxi on the runway. Unlike most of us who travel at airports, he does not have to wait for other flights in front of him. As soon as that plane is ready to take off, it can take off. So, Monica, we keep saying this is a high-stakes meeting between the two leaders. They have not been face-to-face since 2019. We, of course, all remember Helsinki a few years before that. What is the world going to be watching for today?
Yeah, and remember, President Putin hasn't been to the United States in more than a decade, and he hasn't met with an American president here in this manner since long before that, outside of the UN, which was that last visit. So President Trump, remember, on the campaign trail promised to end this conflict as soon as he took office. Certainly that proved to be far more challenging, but the president thought that his relationship with President Putin was something that he could use to perhaps broker a peace deal. And so today he says that within the first few minutes, he's going to know how this could go. And he is also talking about the possibility of walking away entirely if it doesn't go well. He puts the odds of failure, Joe, at 25%. And then he says if that happens, he will walk out of there, maybe do a press conference by himself instead of a joint press conference, and then head back home to Washington.
So you mentioned the 25% chance of failure here. Obviously, the hope is to get somewhere in that other 75%. What is perhaps the biggest win that President Trump could hope for out of this meeting? Is it just setting the stage for a second meeting that actually would include Ukraine's President Zelensky?
Well, that's certainly how he's been framing it. President Trump said yesterday all he wants to do in this meeting is set the table for the next meeting, which he's calling the truly key one, the clutch one, to see if there can be an actual framework that's achieved. But the interesting thing, Joe, is that yesterday he said a couple of times, look, what would be easiest is if this talk with Putin goes well, I then just call up Zelensky and invite him here to Alaska, and we try to knock this out, quote, almost immediately. But the likelihood of that is pretty difficult, because the logistics involved in getting him here and getting President Putin to agree to that is a high bar. So that's maybe the ideal scenario. That is what a real success, based on what the White House has said, would look like. That's what kind of a victory would look like for the president. But he has really fashioned himself this ultimate deal maker who thinks he can make progress here. He has cited other conflicts in the last couple of months where he has hosted the leaders at the White House or traveled and helped to end violence in other hotspots around the world. So he thinks that he can do that here as well, though, again, it's proven to be a far more complex challenge with a lot of different pieces. And again, even if they sit down, the three of them, to hash some of this out, there are still major disagreements between what that agreement could look like when it comes to the actual territory and what the president referred to as territorial swaps, where there could be some, quote, in his words, divvying up. Ukraine has been very clear about what it does not want to give up. So the question is, what could President Trump offer President Putin to incentivize him to get to yes? And then they have to take that all to President Zelensky and see if he would even agree to that. So again, a multi-step process that's in front of us, Joe, as Air Force One takes off there from Joint Base Andrews.
You're watching it right now. Air Force One in the air, a 7-hour journey ahead. The plane will land where Monica Alba is right now in Anchorage, Alaska. It is a long day ahead. We've got a 7-hour flight. Then President Trump and President Putin will meet face to face. They will have conversations behind closed doors. We know President Trump likes to talk. We know President Putin likes to talk. So that could last hours. And then afterward, the hope is that they will hold a joint news conference to discuss whatever came out of this summit. Monica Alba, thank you so much. For more, let's bring in Ambassador William Taylor. He is the former ambassador to Ukraine and the appropriate person to talk to on a day like this. Ambassador, as we watch this plane make its way to Anchorage, we know President Trump ran on a campaign promise he would bring about a ceasefire on day one. The reality proving to be far more difficult now, about 7 months in. What do you think the strategy is going into this summit?
Joe, I think the strategy is pretty clear. Force Putin to come to the table and negotiate a ceasefire. President Trump has been very clear. He wants to stop the killing. The way to stop the killing is to cease fire, stop the fire, stop the shooting. And that should be the goal, apparently is the goal. In order to do that, in order to get to that goal, that achievement, President Trump needs to put pressure on President Putin. President Putin has given no indication he's ready to stop. But President Trump has said if President Putin doesn't agree, he'll put sanctions on. And he's already made good on part of that. He's put sanctions on India for buying Russian oil. And he's threatened to put it also on China. So and that's got President Putin's attention. So that's the strategy, Joe.
According to NBC News sources, we know President Trump spoke with European leaders on a call Wednesday. He told them he does not plan to discuss any potential divisions of territory when he meets with President Putin today. That's despite earlier comments that he would. We know land swapping is something President Putin seems very keen on. President Zelensky does not. Do you think Zelensky would ever concede any loss of Ukrainian territory if it means bringing an end to this war?
I don't. I don't think that President Zelensky will agree to a legal recognition of the loss of territory. And that's an important distinction, the legal acknowledgement of the Russian. President Zelensky may grudgingly, he doesn't like this, but he may accept that de facto, that in fact, the Russians do occupy 19% of his country. And he knows that he can't take it back militarily right now. So de facto, on the ground, President Zelensky understands that the Russians are there, but he will never give up legal claim to that territory.
What do you think is the best possible outcome for today? What do you worry could be the worst outcome today?
So the best possible outcome is President Trump succeeds in getting Putin to agree to a ceasefire, an air, land, and sea ceasefire. President Trump and President Zelensky agreed on that 3 months ago, took it to Putin. He said no. So a good outcome is President Trump says to Mr. Putin, I'm going to put sanctions on you and continue to provide the weapons to the Ukrainians if you don't agree. That's the best outcome. Worst outcome is Putin says no. Again, he says, no, I'm not going to come to the table and negotiate. And that then leads President Trump to say, fine. Sanctions on India, sanctions on China for buying your oil. You're in trouble economically. We're going to continue to provide weapons to the Ukrainians. See you later.
We remember what happened in Helsinki 7 years ago. Do you worry when President Trump and President Putin get behind closed doors and the cameras aren't there that Mr. Trump can be swayed by President Putin, maybe believe some things that aren't essentially true and come out showing a stronger support for Russia than he did going in?
Joe, you're right. That's what happened in 2019. However, the roles are reversed, Joe. The roles are reversed. Now Putin is weaker. Putin has made a very bad decision to invade. He knows it. The world knows it. His economics are terrible. His military has been depleted. Yes, they're making grinding progress on the ground, but Putin is really weakened. He's a pariah. And President Trump is in better shape. President this time than last time. President Trump is confident. He is more convinced than ever that he can make this deal, force President Putin to make this deal. And he learned from the previous mistakes. So I think this is going to be a different discussion than in the first Trump administration.
Ambassador William Taylor, we always appreciate having you on to share your insight with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe.
In California, Governor Gavin Newsom is pushing a plan that could shake up that state's congressional map. He's calling it the Election Rigging Response Act. It would give state Democrats power to redraw districts, sidestepping the state's independent commission. Now, the measure needs state lawmaker approval to go on the November ballot. Newsom says it's a direct response to Republicans in Texas who are moving to add up to 5 more House seats through mid-decade redistricting. NBC News senior national politics reporter Jonathan Allen joins us now to discuss. John, good morning. This is the first time any state beyond Texas has really officially waded into this mid-decade redistricting battle. Of course, it usually happens after we take the census at the beginning of the decade. What exactly would Newsom's plan change in California's redistricting process? How likely is it this could become a reality?
So as it stands right now, Joe, and good to see you this morning, California has an independent redistricting commission that redraws the lines every decade as the Constitution prescribes. And what this would do is put a ballot initiative before voters to basically get around that and allow the legislature to draw new lines. The legislature is heavily Democratic and would be expected to draw lines that would favor the Democrats. Now, California's got 43 Democratic House members and 9 Republican House members. It's not clear to me exactly how many seats the Democrats could pick up by changing those lines, but certainly there's a possibility that they could pick up at least a few.
Newsom says this is about fighting back against Republicans in Texas. We know the plan there would be to give the GOP 5 more seats. This plan by Newsom, how would that shift the balance? Would it basically get it back to where we are now? What's he hoping to do?
I think he's hoping to not only get it back to where things are now, but maybe even go further than that. Again, I'm not a cartographer. I haven't drawn the maps of California myself. There are a significant number of Republicans in the state, and there are whole vast swaths of the state that are pretty Republican. So, it's unlikely that he's going to be able to get an all-Democratic delegation, but he could certainly pick up, a few to several seats doing this. I think what that trips is perhaps more states trying to do the same thing, but California and Texas, being as large as they are the biggest pockets to try to have a partisan advantage if one side or the other wants it.
John, I actually took a cartography class my senior year of college when I was totally tuned out and just trying to get through, and I remember nothing. So I can't help you out
that doesn't surprise me.
All right, my last question for you here. If California does succeed, what does the timeline look for this? We'd have a vote in November, and if it does pass, then when would we see the changes take effect?
I expect the legislature will have, and Newsom will put together an idea for a map long before there's actually a vote. So you could see it, and by the way, it would have to happen pretty quickly after that because candidates will want to file to run. You have primaries. California's got an open primary and then a general election in 2026. So wouldn't be long after the vote.
I lied. I do have one more question for you. Are we seeing any other states thinking about this or considering it? Because it really does have to be a state like Texas or California that's big but is really heavily toward one party or the other, right?
Yeah, there are a handful of states that have said that they're looking at it. Indiana is looking at it on the Republican-led side. New York's looking at it on the Democratic-led side. New York's a huge state. They have some ability potentially to pick up a couple of seats there. Also, let's just be clear, dividing up the people based on their current partisan affiliation or the way that they behaved in the last election is not necessarily a winning formula to winning in the next election. Sometimes people change their minds, or some people show up that didn't show up last time, or people that showed up last time don't show up this time. So, there's a lot that goes into this, but so several states are looking at it. My own home state of Maryland may be looking at it. It's got 7 Democrats and 1 Republican, and certainly the balance of the population, their political preferences are not 7-1 Democratic. So it'd be interesting to see if they can pull off an 8-0 in the state.
All right, John, always good to have you with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
On
Joe.
the economic front, we are taking a look at your grocery bill. It may be about to get even more expensive. The latest producer price index out from the Bureau of Labor Statistics revealed wholesale prices for domestic vegetables rose nearly 39% last month compared with a year ago. That's what stores pay before the produce actually hits the shelves. NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans joins us with more on this. That is quite a headline
It really
right there.
is.
I understand the largest summer increase since 1947. Why?
It got a lot of attention. That is a notable increase in a category that can bounce around a lot. You just don't see it jump like that. 3 reasons here, economists tell us: weather, drought, and dry conditions, basically crimping how much is being produced. Worker shortages because of deportations and the fear of deportations. In some cases, farmers are saying on their farms. And then tariffs. These are domestic vegetables we're talking about. But when you have imported vegetables the prices are rising, you don't often see the same cucumber is charged the same amount when it gets here. So it might be that prices are rising. Producer level prices are rising because of that, too.
So we're seeing the wholesale prices go up. Do we expect to see this in our grocery bills?
Well, yeah. Margins for food are very, very thin. I think the
big differentiator here will be big versus small. I think the big, huge retailers can absorb more of the higher costs that come, but the smaller they are, the more likely they are to pass on some of that cost to consumers. So there is kind of a feeling that you can see these prices start to rise pretty quickly.
Is this part of the usual ups and downs we see with food prices, or is there something different
There's something different going on here, and I'd like to see this 3 or 4 months in a row and see what the trend is. That's always important in these data points. Just 1 month, now it's got our attention. We'll see how it goes from here on out. But when you zoom out and you look at the overall producer price index, it increased almost 1% from June to July. That also is rare. That's the biggest jump in, I think, 3 years. So it tells you that something's happening cost-wise on the producer level. The question is what happens from producers to consumers. So far, we have seen a lot of that higher costs for food and for imported goods has been absorbed. How long does that last? We just don't know.
And just bigger picture, it does seem like we're seeing consumers are saving a little more, spending a little less. Is that the trend right now?
Yeah, and I think one of the things, like you just talk about Amazon with its, free same-day grocery delivery. Everyone knows consumers are exhausted by inflation, that they are pinching their pennies, that they're looking for the best value. So the good news, I think, is that some of these big retailers are trying to find ways to get your business. So there are deals to be had out there.
Good to know. Christine Romans, always good to have you with us. Thank you. This weekend is shaping up to be a hot one, with heat indexes expected to hit the triple digits in the Midwest and southeastern parts of the country. Those areas are also expecting strong scattered storms like this one that sent fans running for cover at a minor league baseball game in Florida Thursday night. Tropical storm Erin is churning in the middle of the Atlantic and picking up speed. Forecasters expect it will become a major hurricane over the weekend. Right now, it does not look like it's going to make landfall in the U.S., but it could still cause dangerous surf conditions along the East Coast. So let's get a look at what to expect this weekend from your Morning News Now weather. Meteorologist Michelle Grossman joins us now with the forecast. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. Perfect summary. And yes, we will start out with today's forecast, and we'll go through the weekend, and we'll get to Erin also. So taking a look at today, two big weather stories. We have heat alerts throughout portions of the plains, into the Mississippi Valley, into the southeast. We're going to see temperatures soaring into the 90s. It's going to feel like 110 in spots. Also looking at the chance for scattered showers and storms once again in the southeast. Like the past few days, past few weeks, months, let's say, it seems, or at least it feels like, we could see some flooding rains with any of these showers or storms. Less humid in New England, the Northeast, feeling a little bit better there. Temperatures still warm, but right around normal for this time of year. Then we're looking at the chance for severe storms in portions of the northern plains, the upper Midwest. We could see storms that produce 60-mile-per-hour winds, some hail. Could see a brief tornado and locally heavy downpours. Also down to the south along the Gulf Coast states, we're looking at tropical moisture moving in. We have a disturbance in the Gulf that could bring in that rain, or most likely will bring in the rain. And then more moisture into the southwest. That's monsoonal moisture. We're going to start to see rain moving into the Pacific Northwest by tomorrow. That's a front that's moving through. It'll make its way across the country over the weekend. But for Saturday, still looking at a flood risk in portions of the upper Midwest into the Great Lakes. So that's going to stay in place over the next few days. The heat also does stay in place. We're looking at temperatures once again into the 90s. You factor in the humidity. It's going to feel like over 100 degrees in many spots, especially in the southeast. And notice the southeast looking very similar. We're looking at the chance for more scattered showers and storms, and that's going to extend into portions of the northeast too on Saturday. Better chance on Sunday for showers and storms, especially in New England and the interior parts of the northeast into the Great Lakes region. Showers and storms in the upper Midwest once again, and also the northern plains. Looking good in terms of no rain into the central plains, also the southern plains on Sunday, but it'll be hot once again. And we're looking at those scattered showers and storms in portions of the Pacific Northwest. Latest on Erin, a very strong tropical storm. We're looking at winds at 70 miles per hour. Remember, Cat 1 storm is 74 miles per hour. So we do anticipate this becoming a Category 1 storm later on today. Movement is northwest at 17 miles per hour, and then it's really going to blossom. It's going to go into an environment with favorable ingredients. That's warm water, low wind shear, not really seeing dry air. So as we go throughout time here, there's that Category 1 storm. Then we're going to see it blossom into a Category 3 storm and eventually a Category 4 storm by early Monday morning. Joe?
Reminder, it's that time of year. All right, Michelle, thank you so much.
Sure.
Much more to come on this hour of Morning News Now, including continuing coverage of our top story, President Trump on his way to America's last frontier, Alaska, for a high-stakes one-on-one meeting with Vladimir Putin. First, after the break, the bitter legal battle that's brewing between Priscilla Presley, ex-wife of Elvis Presley, and a pair of her former business partners. We're going to dig into their high-profile family feud next. We're back with a high-profile legal fight centered on the Presley family legacy. Elvis's ex-wife, Priscilla Presley, is being sued by two of her former business partners. They're accusing her of trying to seize control of the Presley family trust and the Graceland estate. NBC News correspondent Liz Kreutz joins us now with more on this. Liz, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning. Yeah, these are some pretty explosive allegations. Priscilla Presley's business partners are accusing her of defrauding them and also of exploiting the death of her and Elvis's daughter, Lisa Marie, for financial gain. Their claims that Priscilla's attorney adamantly denies, calling them malicious character assassination.
Our heart is broken, Lisa. We all love you.
This morning, a legal battle involving the heirs to rock and roll royalty. 2 years after the sudden death of Elvis Presley's only daughter, Lisa Marie, two former business partners of Priscilla Presley, Elvis's ex-wife and Lisa Marie's mother, are suing Priscilla for $50 million. The plaintiffs, who were the heads of Priscilla Presley Partners, alleging fraud and breach of contract and making another explosive allegation about the role she played in the death of her daughter, who died in 2023, likely from a weight loss surgery complication. According to the complaint, Lisa Marie was noticeably ill, complaining to Priscilla about her health when they attended the 2023 Golden Globe Awards.
Lisa Marie, Priscilla, I love you forever.
But instead of caring for her, the lawsuit claims the 80-year-old clasped to the spotlight, going out to the Chateau Marmont for drinks with Lisa. And just days later, when Lisa Marie was rushed to the hospital, despite Lisa's clear directive to prolong her life, Priscilla pulled the plug within hours of Lisa being admitted and before her granddaughter Riley was able to get to the hospital, according to the complaint. After her daughter's death, the suit says Priscilla exclaimed, "I'm the queen, I'm in charge of Graceland." In a written statement, Priscilla Presley's attorney said these fabricated claims have absolutely no validity, and accusing a grieving mother of contributing to her daughter's death is malicious character assassination and should be broadly condemned. Adding, Lisa Marie's daughter, actress Riley Keough, stands behind her grandmother 100%.
What's your name?
Priscilla Boyer. As depicted in the 2023 film based on her memoir, Priscilla was married to Elvis for 6 years. They divorced 4 years before he passed away. But as she told Jenna at Graceland in 2017, the mansion she once shared with Elvis still feels like home.
When you walk into these gates, you can still feel that
It's
life.
like I never left. It's like I never left. I'm here right now, and it's like I can visualize him walking down these stairs.
So, Liz, this is quite complicated because Priscilla Presley has actually also sued these business partners before, right?
Yeah, Joe, that's right. So last year, Priscilla Presley sued them, accusing them of financial elder abuse. But an attorney for one of those business partners described that lawsuit as retaliatory due to another lawsuit the business partners had filed against Priscilla the year before. Both of those lawsuits are still ongoing. As for this lawsuit, NBC News did reach out to representatives for Lisa Marie's daughter, Riley Keough, who told NBC News Priscilla's attorneys say it all. Joe?
All right. Liz Kreutz, thank you so much. To the Middle East now, where criticism is growing over a new Israeli settlement project that could end the possibility of Palestinian statehood. NBC's Matt Bodner joins us with that and other headlines around the world in 60 seconds. Matt, good morning.
Joe, good morning. Israel is facing a fresh round of international criticism this morning after Finance Minister Smotrich announced plans to approve construction of more than 3,000 homes in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. These settlements are illegal under international law. That is according to an International Court of Justice ruling last year. The planned settlement would essentially divide the West Bank into North and South. Moving along now to Geneva, talks aimed at hashing out a treaty aimed at curbing plastic pollution around the globe failed to reach an agreement Friday. These talks stretched on for 11 days at the United Nations offices in Geneva. The deadlock issue revolved around whether or not to put global, legally binding controls on toxic chemicals used to make plastics. This is actually the second time this effort has failed. We'll wrap up this hour in Australia. A 25-million-year-old fossil discovered by chance on a local beach that may be what could effectively be the missing link in the story of whale evolution. Back in the day, whales were tiny. Now they're not. This one falls somewhere in between, and this creature existed 34 to 23 million years ago. Back to you, Joe.
Didn't realize whales were so tiny back in the day. All right, Matt, thank you so much. Coming up, the queer community reportedly facing some concerning new roadblocks in the art world in 2025. When we come back, why some high-profile gallery curators say exhibits are being scaled back or even canceled under a Trump White House. That's next on Morning News Now. We're back with our top story, the high-stakes summit between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Earlier this morning, President Trump left Washington aboard Air Force One, heading to Anchorage, Alaska, where this highly anticipated meeting is happening. The White House says the summit is aimed at ending the 3-year-long war in Ukraine, something President Trump vowed during his campaign to do on day one in office. Now he's warning Russia will face severe consequences if it does not agree to a ceasefire. But in the last 24 hours, President Trump admitted there is a 25% chance the meeting will not end well. This will be the first time Putin has stepped foot on American soil in a decade, and the first time these two leaders will be face to face since 2019. Now let's get a closer look at what else is making news in the world of politics this morning, starting with an update on President Trump's federal takeover of policing in the nation's capital. Here to bring us that story and more, NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Julie Circuit. Julie, good morning.
Hey, Joe. Happy Friday. Good morning. We begin in Washington, where the Trump-directed federal takeover of the city continues, but without D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, who, according to reports, is in Martha's Vineyard. Her spokesperson tells us she's out of town for a family commitment and will return later today, with Bowser later revealing she, quote, canceled a scheduled family trip to lead our city's crisis management efforts, and that she left town to pick up her daughter from camp. Now to Mississippi, where officials there can enforce a state law that requires the nation's largest social media companies to verify the age of their users and obtain parental consent from minors. The Supreme Court on Thursday ruling in the state's favor after a coalition of platforms, including Facebook, X, and Instagram, urged the High Court to block enforcement of the law, arguing it infringed on users' First Amendment rights. Similar laws exist in both red and blue states amid growing concerns over privacy and safety for kids online. And finally, in Texas, where House Democrats there have a plan to return to the state they fled to protest Republicans' proposed redistricting 2 weeks ago. In a statement, they said lawyers had advised them to return to, quote, build a strong public legislative record for the upcoming legal battle. The new map could net Republicans 5 additional seats in Congress. Meanwhile, as you heard earlier, Democrats in blue states are ramping up their efforts, too. California Governor Newsom called for a special election for a ballot measure to ask voters to approve a new map in the state that could counter the Texas effort. And that is a look at what is making news in politics this morning. Joe?
All right, Julie, thank you so much. As LGBTQ plus freedoms come under attack across the country, museum curators say the political climate is affecting the types of exhibitions that are getting staged and what art the public is able to go and actually see. In the last few months, LGBTQ-focused exhibits at several Smithsonian museums, plus shows in Arizona and Chicago, were either canceled or edited to be less queer. NBC contributor, journalist, and author Dan Allen has been looking into these changes. He joins me now. Dan, good to have you with us. Talk about what some of the biggest examples of censorship you've been looking into, and what do institutions have to say about all this on the record?
Yeah, so there are quite a few, actually, but some of the most notable ones were that the Smithsonian National Museum of African Art was set to do an exhibition of queer art from Africa and the African diaspora that was supposed to coincide with World Pride this year. But that exhibition got postponed until 2026. The museum cited public funding challenges to pushing it back to next year. Then we had also in DC, the Art Museum of the Americas was set to have a show called Nature's Wild with Andal Gossain. And those were works that were all inspired by a book by Andal Gossain called Nature's Wild, Love, Sex, and Law in the Caribbean. So this wasn't a queer show per se, but it dealt with a lot of queer themes. And to my knowledge, the museum hasn't given any explanation about why they've canceled that exhibition. And then, of course, the biggest was Amy Sherald canceling her own show in July after she caught wind of the fact that the National Portrait Gallery was considering editing her show or adding context, as they put it, for one of her pieces called Transforming Liberty, which was a depiction of a Black trans woman in the pose of the Statue of Liberty. So it's not really clear what the National Portrait Gallery was going to do. It seemed that they were going to add video of some kind, either replacing or giving sort of both siding the trans issue. And Cheryl canceled her exhibition, not wanting the trans issue to be the focus of her exhibition.
And we just saw some of Amy Sherrill's work, which,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we just saw some of Amy Sherrill's work, which, of course, has been on exhibition in the Whitney Museum this year.
Right.
Incredible exhibit there. I want to ask you more. I mean, because so often when the LGBTQ plus community is maybe facing resistance or challenge in the political world, the art world is sort of seen as sacred. Like, that's the area where people can express themselves and feel like they're not being controlled or oppressed in any way. So this is a big deal for so many. I mean, how are artists, museum directors, even members of the public trying to fight back against some of these things?
Right. Well, for artists, I think it's very difficult. I think they are going to have to focus on, having shows at galleries, which is what artists have to do anyway when they're in their early careers. But, having a museum exhibition might not be such a possibility for these artists anymore. For museum directors, they can fight back certainly by being brave, and as a couple of the curators in my show or in my piece say, that like these shows can be a gold mine. Like there was a show in Chicago called The First Homosexuals that ended last month, and got rave reviews and huge crowds, and sold out the last 2 months it was there. So directors just have to sort of be brave. But what I hadn't realized before looking into the piece is that this is nothing new. The censorship is nothing new. It's just that this political environment is giving museum directors more license to be more conservative than they might have been. And a lot of these boards, museum boards and donors are quite conservative.
All right. Dan Allen, appreciate your time. Appreciate you coming on to talk about your reporting.
Thank you.
Coming up, a same-day delivery dash when Morning News Now returns. Why Amazon is betting big on getting groceries to millions of hungry Prime customers' doors in the quickest time possible. That is next. Stay with us. We're back with a new announcement from Amazon. It's going to start including groceries as part of its same-day deliveries, which could be big for millions of Prime subscribers worldwide. To sign the race in the online grocery delivery space is heating up. NBC's business and data correspondent Brian Chung joins us now with more on this. Brian, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Joe. This is a big deal for those millions of Amazon subscribers that are hooked, and they're returning to try to buy groceries online and bundle it with the same orders that they're able to get other Amazon products. It's all part of the heating up race for same-day groceries. In a world where just about anything is one click away.
So easy, so convenient. Literally life-changing.
For many hungry shoppers, filling up this cart instead of this one is an experience worth savoring.
I placed this order an hour and a half ago. It's already sitting in my kitchen.
Hi. How are you?
Same-day grocery delivery is more than a phenomenon. It's becoming a new norm, with one survey reporting that more than half of Americans across generations are now buying at least some of their groceries online. It comes as prominent companies like Instacart, Shipt, and Walmart Plus compete for valuable customer dollars.
I think that it can be a crowded space, but I think Amazon literally just took care of that.
After trial runs in Phoenix, Orlando, and Kansas City, Amazon is expanding their same-day delivery services to now include fresh food, a new service now available in more than 1,000 cities and towns, with plans to grow to 2,300 plus communities by the end of the year, giving more customers the option to order perishables like produce, dairy, and meat, and receive them within hours, along with everyday household items.
You can order strawberries and pack of celery, but you could also get batteries and like a hat.
This just makes the one-stop shop even easier. You don't have to go to multiple places. You don't have to worry about parking, and it's all coming at once. It's the convenience issue.
With the enduring popularity of meal delivery apps and plenty of options in the grocery delivery space, it's the latest move by a major brand to expand their food footprint and get us what we're craving fast.
They're delivering time back onto your calendar, one grocery bag at a time.
And with veggieflation possibly on the horizon, as prices for fresh and dry vegetables rose nearly 40% from June to July, the largest month-to-month summer increase ever recorded. Amazon and its competitors hope to sell customers on the savings of not having to use gas to make that trip to the store, with a grocery cart available at your fingertips.
So the big question, how much is this going to cost Amazon customers?
Yeah, well, look, nothing is free. You have to be an Amazon Prime member to get this benefit. And even if you are an Amazon Prime member, you have to have a minimum in your cart of $25. But for those that don't have Amazon Prime, you could still get access to the same-day grocery delivery. It's just going to cost you about $12.99 per order. So if you do the math, Amazon subscription is about $140 a year. So if you do this more than 10 times, it's probably worth it just to get the membership. And at comparable stores like Target and Walmart, they also offer same-day grocery delivery. You have to be a member for those services as well. And you only get that for carts that are larger than $35, Joe.
All right, Brian, thank you so much. Staying with business headlines, the FTC reportedly has a popular health company in the hot seat. CNBC's Silvana Henao has that and some other Money Minute headlines. Silvana, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good Friday morning to you. Yeah, the Federal Trade Commission is probing complaints about Hims and Hers. So Bloomberg reports the probe centers around the telehealth platform's ads and cancellation policy. Now, the company hasn't responded to a request for comment. Hims has previously said it's cooperating with an unspecified probe after the FTC demanded information back in 2023. The FTC has cases against Amazon and Uber over their subscription policies. Meanwhile, WhatsApp is rolling out new group calling features, including letting you schedule a team call in advance. So you can add future calls under the Calls tab, allowing you to invite friends or coworkers, and the call links will be added to your calendar app. Now, WhatsApp is also adding a raise your hand option to let your group know that you want to speak. It's a feature similar to Zoom and Google Meet. And Apple is bringing back a blood oxygen monitor for some of its smartwatches. The company says users with the Apple Watch Series 9, 10, and Ultra 2 who don't currently have the feature will be able to access a redesigned version following a software update. Sensor data from the monitor will be measured on the iPhone you have paired with the watch. The feature is coming back more than a year after Apple removed it to get around a patent dispute with medical watchmaker Massimo, Joe.
All right, Silvana, thanks so much.
You got it.
Ready or not, it is back to school season for schools across the country. And if you haven't hit the store yet for those essential items, well, you're still in luck. Major retailers are offering incredible deals, especially on merch for college students. Here with everything you need to know is our chief consumer investigative correspondent, News Now anchor Vicki Nguyen. Vicki, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Joe. I don't know about your college dorm room, but I'll tell you what, I had a comforter, a desk, and a lamp. These days, it's gone next level.
Yeah.
Good morning to you at home. With family budgets tight this year, knowing where to shop for your back-to-school deals can save you big bucks. We have your shopping guide on great deals for students K through 12 and those college kids, too.
With nearly 20 million college students headed to campus this fall, retailers are rolling out big end-of-summer sales on everything from school clothes and supplies to tech and dorm room essentials.
Is back to school second only to the holiday season?
Yes, this store will do more business than December. This is their Super Bowl. Their colleagues
Target Senior Vice President Samir Shah says despite rising tariffs, they're keeping 2024 prices on many back-to-school items, from notebooks and binders to pens and storage bins.
I love the theme that I went with this year.
And with dorm decorating posts going viral on social media,
you are going to absolutely hate the floors that come with your dorm, so make sure you get yourself a rug.
For the first time, many Targets, like this one outside Boston, have entire sections for dorm room design, offering furniture and accessories in 4 distinct styles.
We're always paying attention to what the students are looking for, and our curation of the entire assortment can reflect that.
For Northeastern University students Shannon and Kira, it's one-stop shopping.
It's so easy. All the colors are in like one area in the dorm section, so I can just kind of throw it all together, and it makes sense, and it looks good in the end.
Walmart, do your thing.
Walmart also offering great deals on dorm room merch, even letting students create mock-ups of their space online. Best Buy slashing prices on popular student tech. Amazon Prime offering up to half off select school supplies. And for shoppers ages 18 to 24, a new Prime for Young Adults membership gives cash back on a variety of items and costs half the price of a regular Prime membership.
Tell me how you save money.
I typically like to compare prices, and then sometimes I'm not afraid to splurge a little bit if I know the quality is going to last, because I'm planning on keeping most of my furniture for my future apartments.
The deals aren't just for college kids, with many K through 12 schools starting after Labor Day in the Northeast. Retailers also rolling out new sales for younger students.
Bring on the new year with Kohl's Back to School sale.
Starting Monday, Kohl's Friends and Family event will slash prices on kids' apparel, backpacks, and lunchboxes, and give an additional 20% off qualifying purchases. Back at Target, you can get over 1,000 kids' essentials for under $5, from water bottles and headphones to school outfits.
The number one for back to school shopping is things that they really quickly grow out of every year.
With 3 girls under 8, mom Jess Hennessy says stretching her dollar is critical this time of year.
Things are just so expensive, groceries, clothing, utilities. So when I'm shopping for my family, I'm really making sure that I'm getting the best bang for my buck.
All right, Vicki, we know you are just overflowing with advice for everyone for back-to-school tips, so what else do you have to save some money?
Okay, we know technology always costs so much, those laptops, those iPads, the computers, so consider buying pre-owned if you can. Graphing calculators these days, they're like a couple $100, Joe. Go to sites like Back Market, eBay, Amazon. They have a secondary market. My piece of advice here, make sure you know the warranty and the terms. Generally, these are refurbished items. They work just as good as new, but you just want to make sure.
It's incredible to see what kids are doing nowadays. I had a desk, a bed, I think I had bed sheets, and then that lamp, you know, the one with the very thin, long, and then it
you could bend it? Oh, okay.
No, the one that shot light onto the ceiling.
Oh, okay.
I feel like everyone had that lamp.
No, totally. I had a shower caddy. I mean, these days people have got throws, they've got pillows, rugs. You're like, how much do you need for this little space?
No kidding.
They look great, though. I will say that.
For them, makes them happy. All right, thanks, Vicki. Coming up, finally Friday, we've got a bit of a tradition here on Morning News Now. When we come back, we've got your ticket to the latest and greatest from the world of entertainment and beyond. Pop culture whiz, friend of the show, Brian Balthazar, is everything you simply can't miss this weekend. Next. Finally this hour, it's Friday, which means it's time for your weekly can't miss list. Look at all the movies, shows, and music you need to see and hear this weekend. Joining us now to go over the list is entertainment journalist, pop culture expert, and friend of the show, Brian Balthazar. Brian, good to have you with us.
Good to be here.
We're about to go to the Hamptons or something this week.
Sorry, we got to dash off for a nice luncheon.
All right, let's start things off. We got a movie called Nobody 2.
Right.
I just asked you, was there a
Nobody 1? In fact, there was. It was a sleeper hit, though. It was 2021.
It was.
And Bob Odenkirk, who people love from Better Call Saul, Breaking Bad, The Bear, he is an assassin who tries to take his family on a vacation, get away from work a little bit. I will tell you, I'm not a fight scene guy. Like, I don't be like, oh, the fight scenes.
Yeah.
These fight scenes are insane, and they're kind of almost they're insane and amusing at the same time. I actually think this is one that maybe you wouldn't think would be for me because I'm off in the Hamptons having lunch. But I will go see this. I think
and
this
he
is
seems
fun.
like such an unlikely action hero.
And he did
guy.
intense training. For the first one, he trained for 2 years, and this one, he trained more than 2. He trained a while, so he's been really kind of rising to the occasion of this genre.
All right, let's talk about Americana, starring Sydney Sweeney, who's been in the news a bit lately.
A little
and also
bit.
Halsey.
Just a bit.
This is a pretty serious one, right?
So this is kind of like a dark comedy Western. Sydney Sweeney and a handful of others are all trying to basically, for lack of a better way of putting it, steal a piece of Native American art so that it can be sold on the underground market. The worst laid plans often go terribly.
Yeah.
And so this is the story of all that happens when they all try to get at it. It's comedic, it's funny, but it's also dark. And some are calling it kind of like a neo-modern Western.
Got it. And speaking of, like, Westerns, we've got East of Wall, but this one's actually based on a true story, and I understand some of the stars are real-life female rodeo riders.
Right. So this is the East Wall is a place in South Dakota, and someone once said to the director, "You want to know a real story? Go east of Wall." And so it's a mother and daughter who are horse trainers and own a ranch. They are playing themselves in the film, but they are also surrounded by more professional actors playing characters. So it is a version of their life, and how they're trying to save their ranch. But there's intermixed. It really does feel like a documentary. Sometimes when you're watching the trailer, even you'll be like, wait, is this real or is this not real? And the answer is kind of it's a little bit of both because the director filmed them doing real things during the 2 years leading up to the film.
Just looking at the video, parts of it seem like it could be like a documentary.
They're calling it naturalistic, almost a documentary drama. So it's a very interesting. But they're playing themselves, which is really interesting.
And do you know what else is East of Wall? my home state of Minnesota. All right.
No kidding.
There you go. Okay, if you're staying in this weekend, you want to stream.
Yes.
We've got some true stories. Marlee Matlin, who's been in our world for decades, won an Academy Award.
A pioneer. At 21, she still remains the youngest female Best Actress winner for Children of a Lesser God. She really is a pioneer. You know, I'm addicted to watching subtitles during all of my shows and films, and we owe that in large part due to her. What's interesting here, too, is we're seeing conversations. She even had her crew. Many of them were hearing impaired or deaf on the making of this documentary. And it's a really interesting story. There's much more to her life and what she did for her industry and for her community in the film.
Truly groundbreaking. And then years later, we had Coda, which, of course, did so well.
An incredible story,
Rainmaker is on Peacock. This is a new adaptation of a John Grisham novel. What do we know about this?
Okay, so this Rainmaker is an attorney who can bring in the business, you know, can really bring in the cases. This was a 1995 film that starred Matt Damon, and you can see shades of Matt Damon in the new actor. This is basically spread out over a series, corruption in one particular long-running case with a mother whose child died in the hospital. Is there more to that than meets the eye? And then, of course, there's a little bit of the humor of Suits, because this is also a USA Network thing, so they kind of added a little bit of that humor. And we see a John Slattery from Mad Men in there as well.
This feels like the type of thing people are going to want to watch.
Yes, and John Grisham, great storyteller.
Exactly. All right, we got about 30 seconds left here, but Cardi B released new music, and we got a video for her upcoming album. It seems like a riff off a popular
Imaginary
Jay-Z
Players
song.
by Jay-Z. His Players ends with an S, hers ends with a Z. So she's sampling this. She also has her Am I the Drama album coming out September 19th. If you're a Cardi B fan, we can't play much of it on this show. Just gonna say, there's a reason we're not sampling. Right, so look at the video.
On our way to the Hamptons.
That's right, exactly.
Cardi B just a couple weeks ago was the host of SummerSlam, which was the big WWE event here.
I enjoy her a lot. So.
She's fun. All right. Brian, thank you so much. That's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now, but don't go anywhere. The news continues right now.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.